instincts, dulled but never forgotten, had been screaming at him since he'd dropped out of hyperspace. The usual traffic around the colony was missing. The regular cargo ships, the civilian shuttles, even the maintenance drones, all gone. His ship's computer beeped, marking the arrival of another vessel at the system's edge. James froze, his hand hovering over the controls. The new signal was massive, a capital ship, maybe bigger. Then another appeared. And another. "No," he whispered, his throat tightening. "Not here. Not now." The colony below continued its peaceful afternoon, unaware of the gathering storm above. James could see children playing in the protected parks, their laughter silenced by the vacuum between them. Merchants walked the streets between the environmental domes, trading goods from a dozen worlds. An alien mother, one of the gentle Mira species with their floating, jellyfish-like bodies, guided her offspring toward the education center. James's hands trembled as he punched in the emergency codes to contact the colony council. They had to be warned. He'd seen this pattern before, back in the war. The Collective, a militant alliance of superior species, always struck the same way: silence the communications, eliminate orbital traffic, then attack when their prey was blind and helpless. "This is Captain Stone to Colony Control. Emergency protocols, authorization Sierra 7 Delta." Static answered him. "Colony Control, please respond. We have incoming hostile vessels. This is not a drill." More static, then a burst of sound. "Captain Stone?" The voice belonged to Elder Reed, head of the Colony Council. "We're receiving you, but there must be some mistake. The Collective assured us of our neutrality in their expansion efforts. We're a peaceful..." Elder Reed, "Listen to me." James fought to keep his voice steady. "I've seen this before. The Collective doesn't honor neutrality. They see it as weakness. Those ships up there? They're assault carriers. You need to activate the defense systems now. Captain, please." Elder Reed's voice carried that special tone of diplomatic condescension that made James's jaw clench. "We've worked hard to maintain peaceful relations with all galactic species. Starting a panic over a simple military exercise would undo years of..." A new alarm screamed through James's cockpit. His sensors had picked up multiple launches from the capital ships, drop pods. Hundreds of them. "They're coming." James's voice turned to ice. "Elder Reed, you have less than 10 minutes before those pods hit. Get everyone to the shelter levels. Now." "Captain Stone, I must insist you cease this fear-mongering. The Council has already discussed..." James cut the transmission. His mind raced through options, through memories of similar situations, through everything he tried to forget about war. The colony's defenses were minimal, designed to handle pirates and wild animals, not an army. The civilian population was mostly scientists, farmers, and merchants. They didn't stand a chance against trained military forces. Not alone, anyway. James Stone had spent 10 years trying to forget what he was, what Earth had made him. The aliens called humans Deathworlders for a reason. Earth's high gravity, harsh environments, and endless conflicts had forged humanity into something the galaxy feared. James had tried to leave that behind, to be just another peaceful settler. But peace was about to end. His ship's computer calculated the pod trajectories. They would land in a standard assault pattern, surrounding the colony, cutting off all escape routes. The Collective was efficient, he had to give them that. They had probably been planning this for months. James guided his ship toward the colony's main landing pad, his decision made. He couldn't save everyone, but he could give them a chance. The Collective had forgotten one crucial detail in their careful planning. They had never fought a human on the ground. They had never faced someone born in Earth's crushing gravity, raised in her unforgiving wilds, trained in her endless wars. They were about to learn why the galaxy feared humans. As his ship touched down, James opened a secure compartment hidden beneath his pilot's seat. Inside lay the pieces of his past he'd sworn never to use again: combat armor, weapons, and tools that no peaceful cargo pilot should own. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over as he checked and armed each piece. Through the viewport he could see the first signs of panic in the streets. Someone had finally spotted the pods. People were running, some toward their homes, others toward the public shelters. A group of alien children stood frozen in fear, their caretaker trying desperately to herd them to safety. James sealed his armor and armed his weapons. The pods would land in 3 minutes. The colony's warning sirens finally began to wail, far too late to make a difference. But maybe, just maybe, it would get more people to safety before hell rained down from above. 10 years of peace, James muttered as he opened his ship's hatch. It was nice while it lasted. The first pod streaked across the sky, a burning arrow of death aimed at the heart of his home. James Stone, son of Earth, veteran of 100 battles he tried to forget, stepped out to meet the coming storm. The warning shot had been fired. The real war was about to begin. The first plasma bolt missed James by inches, superheating the air around him as he dove behind a fallen storage container. The acrid smell of burned metal filled his nostrils. All around him, the sounds of invasion shattered New Haven's peaceful afternoon. The thunderous impact of drop pods, the screams of civilians, and the harsh battle cries of collective soldiers. Through his combat visor, James watched as the alien troops emerged from their pods. They moved with military precision, their armor gleaming under New Haven's red sun. The invaders stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in chitinous plates that their species had evolved on their low-gravity homeworld. On their world they were apex predators. Here they were about to learn a harsh lesson about Earthborn strength. Get to the bunkers. James shouted at a group of civilians frozen in terror nearby. Level 3 shelters. Move. His voice snapped them out of their paralysis. As they ran, a collective soldier raised its weapon. James didn't hesitate. His rifle barked 3 times, the heavy rounds, designed for Earth gravity combat, punching through the alien's supposedly superior armor like paper. The soldier fell, purple blood seeping onto the colony's streets. First blood. James pushed down the familiar surge of combat excitement. He wasn't here to fight, he was here to save lives. A scan of his surroundings showed at least 30 civilians still in the open, including a group of children trapped in the education center across the square. This is James Stone to any colony security forces, he broadcast on the local emergency channel. I need covering fire on the western approach. We have children in the education center. Static answered him. Then a broken voice, Captain Stone? This is Officer Turner. We're not trained for this. Half my team is down. Listen carefully, Turner. You're not fighting to win. You're fighting to survive. Remember your Earth training, use your strength. They come from low-gravity worlds. In close combat you're 3 times stronger. Now give me that covering fire. A burst of gunfire erupted from a security post, forcing the collective troops into cover. James sprinted across the square, his enhanced muscles and combat-optimized armor letting him move faster than the aliens could track. He reached the education center's doors in seconds. Inside he found 15 children, human and alien alike, huddled with their teacher, an elderly human woman named Mrs. Baker. Her face showed fear, but her voice remained steady as she whispered comforting words to her students. Captain Stone, she said, relief flooding her features. The emergency exits are blocked by debris from the pods. Then we make our own exit. James pulled a breaching charge from his belt. Get them away from the west wall. And Mrs. Baker? You're doing great. The old teacher managed to smile as she guided the children to safety. James planted the charge and moved back. The explosion was precisely controlled, creating a hole just big enough for escape. Everyone move. Stay low, stay quiet. James took point as Mrs. Baker led her students out. The children, showing remarkable courage, followed her instructions perfectly. A high-pitched whine filled the air, more drop pods incoming. They had minutes at most before the second wave hit. James's motion tracker showed collective forces converging on their position. Turner, I need that cover fire now. South side. The security team responded, their weapons drawing alien attention away from the escaping children. James brought up the rear, his rifle dropping any soldier that got too close. One alien, braver or stupider than the rest, charged him with a shock blade. James met the charge head-on. The alien's blade sparked against his armor, but James's counterattack demonstrated why humans were feared across the galaxy. His earthborn muscles, evolved under crushing gravity, let him grab the alien's arm and snap it like a twig. The soldier fell, screaming in its native tongue. Get to the bunker entrance. James shouted, pointing the group toward a reinforced doorway. Turner, fall back to defensive position beta. More pods screamed overhead as James provided covering fire for the retreat. The children and Mrs. Baker made it to the bunker, where colony security helped them inside. Turner's team, or what was left of it, joined them. But the collective forces were everywhere now. James counted at least 200 soldiers, with more arriving every minute. The colony's defenses were falling. The streets ran with blood, both alien purple and human red. James reloaded his weapon, checking his ammunition. He had enough for maybe 30 more kills. It wouldn't be enough. Not nearly enough. This is Captain Stone to all security forces, he broadcast. Fall back to the shelter levels. Seal the blast doors. Protect our people. What about you, Captain? Turner's voice crackled through the comm. James watched as more drop pods breached the atmosphere, streaking fire against the darkening sky. His combat computer calculated their trajectories. This wave would surround the colony completely. I'm going hunting, he replied, his voice cold. Seal those doors, Turner. Don't open them for anyone but me, and only if I give the proper codes. The real fight starts now. The shelter's blast doors slid shut with a final heavy clang. James Stone stood alone in the burning streets of New Haven, surrounded by the bodies of fallen aliens. His heart pounded with a rhythm he hadn't felt in 10 years, the battle song of a Deathworlder unleashed. The collective had made 3 mistakes. They had attacked his home. They had threatened his people. And worst of all, they had forgotten what humans really were, apex predators from a world that had forged them in gravity and violence. Time to remind them. Darkness wrapped around James like an old friend as he crouched in the maintenance tunnels beneath New Haven streets. His combat visor painted the world in shades of green, showing him the maze of pipes and conduits that fed the colony's life support systems. Above, he could hear the heavy footsteps of collective search teams. They were looking for him. They had been looking for 3 days. James checked his ammunition again, 2 magazines left for his rifle. One for his sidearm. Not much, but he had already proven he didn't need much. The bodies of 43 collective soldiers scattered across the colony stood testament to that fact. His combat computer chirped softly, marking another patrol pattern. The aliens were learning, adapting their tactics. They no longer moved in small teams that he could pick off easily. Now they swept through in platoon strength, 30 soldiers at a time, watching every angle. But they were still making mistakes. Still thinking like low-gravity species. James pulled up the colony schematics in his visor. The collective had taken control of most surface structures, setting up command centers and barracks in the larger buildings. They thought they were secure up there, protected by numbers and heavy weapons. They hadn't realized that humans were burrowers by nature. A distant explosion rattled the tunnels, another of his traps triggering. James allowed himself a grim smile. The mining charges he'd repurposed were doing their job, keeping the aliens nervous, off balance. 3 days of constant attacks had shattered their confidence. Now they jumped at shadows, wasted ammunition shooting at echoes. His radio crackled. This is command base to hunter-killer teams. The Deathworlder has been spotted in Sector 7. All units converge. Remember, it's just one human. Don't let fear cloud your judgment. Just one human. James almost laughed. They still didn't understand that he moved through the tunnels silently, decades of training guiding each step. The alien commander's voice had told him 2 things. They were scared enough to commit multiple teams to hunting him, and they were monitoring colony communications. Time to use that. James reached a junction box and pulled out his datapad. 10 years as a cargo pilot hadn't dulled his electronic warfare skills. He spliced into the colony's announcement system, set up a delayed broadcast, then began moving again. 3 minutes later, his message played throughout the colony. Collective forces, this is James Stone. In the past 3 days I've killed 43 of your soldiers. I want you to understand why. Humans don't just come from a high-gravity world. We come from a world of predators. Everything on Earth evolved to hunt or be hunted. Your species evolved to be the strongest on your worlds. We evolved to kill the strongest. He was moving through the tunnels as his voice echoed above, marking patrol positions, noting how they reacted. The aliens were clustering together, their biosigns showing elevated stress levels. You have better weapons, better armor, better technology. But you have one weakness that will kill you all. You never learn to be afraid. A collective officer shouted orders in their clicking language, trying to calm his troops. James recognized the voice. The same officer who had ordered the execution of colonial security forces who surrendered. He marked the location in his combat computer. I can see you now, James continued, his voice echoing through every speaker. Your fear tastes like copper in the air. You cluster together, thinking numbers will save you. On your worlds, that works. The more of you there are, the safer you feel. He reached another junction, this one leading to the colony's water recycling plant. Perfect. But I'm not from your worlds. I'm from Earth. And on Earth, when prey clusters together. James pulled out his last mining charge, set the timer, and attached it to a major water pipe. It just makes hunting easier. The explosion rocked the entire colony. Thousands of gallons of water burst from shattered pipes, flooding the lower levels of the recycling plant. Collective soldiers shouted in panic as icy water filled their positions. Their heavy armor, designed for combat in their home gravity, dragged them down. James was already moving, his earth-trained muscles propelling him through the water with powerful strokes. The aliens flailed helplessly, their weapons useless, their comm channels filled with panic that he killed 12 before they even realized he was there. Like I said, he broadcast as he vanished back into the tunnels, leaving behind a scene of carnage that would demoralize any survivors. You never learn to be afraid. Hours later, in his hidden sanctuary deep in the maintenance tunnels, James listened to the collective command channels. They were calling for reinforcements. Elite troops. Hunter-killer teams specializing in Deathworlder combat. He cleaned his weapons while monitoring their transmissions. The aliens were arguing among themselves now. Some wanted to pull back to orbit and bomb the colony. Others insisted they couldn't let one human defeat an entire army. Their commander was screaming about honor and duty. James thought about the colonists huddled in the bunkers below. About Mrs. Baker and her students. About Officer Turner and his brave security team. They were counting on him. His combat computer beeped, showing new ships entering orbit. The elite troops were arriving. James Stone, son of Earth, veteran of 100 battles, and now the nightmare-haunting an alien army, began planning his next hunt. The aliens thought sending elites would change things. They thought specialized training would help them defeat a Deathworlder. They were wrong. The hunting was about to get even better. The elite collective soldier never saw the wire at ankle height. In the dim emergency lighting of the colony's shopping district, the almost invisible filament, stripped from communications cables, waited patiently. The alien's leg caught it at full stride. On their low-gravity worlds, such a trip might have been embarrassing. Under New Haven's Earth-standard gravity, it was lethal. The soldier slammed face-first into the ground with bone-crushing force. His armor cracked and his weapon went sliding across the floor. Before his teammates could react, James dropped from the ceiling pipes above, landing with the full force of his earthborn muscles. The alien's reinforced chest plate shattered under the impact. Point 1 down. 412 to go. The elite troops had arrived 3 days ago, filling the colony's streets with their distinctive black armor and energy weapons. They moved differently than the regular forces, smoother, more cautious. They checked corners, watched the ceiling, and stayed in constant communication. They died just the same. James ghosted through the shadows of a ruined store, his armor's adaptive camouflage bending light around him. Through the broken windows, he could see 3 elite squads converging on their fallen comrade's position. Their helmet sensors swept the area, looking for any sign of the Deathworlder who had been terrorizing their forces. Spread out, their commander ordered over the open channel. Remember your training. This human uses primitive tactics. We are the finest warriors in the collective. James smiled in the darkness. Primitive tactics. If only they knew. He pulled out his datapad and accessed the colony's systems. After a week of guerrilla warfare, he had turned New Haven's entire infrastructure into a weapon. With a few commands, he began his next hunt. The lights in the shopping district died suddenly. Emergency lighting kicked in, then died too. Total darkness fell. Night vision, the commander barked. Don't let it. The sprinkler system activated, spraying not water but coolant from the district's climate control systems. The liquid froze on contact with their armor, playing havoc with their thermal sensors. In the confusion, James moved, his first target never even screamed. The elite soldier simply disappeared into the darkness, dragged up into the ceiling pipes by a cable around his waist. The wet sounds that followed made his squad mates freeze in terror. What was that? One soldier whispered. Command, we need. The colony's announcement system crackled to life, but instead of James's voice, it played something else, the sound of a human child laughing. The eerie echo bounced through the darkened streets, seeming to come from everywhere at once. James watched through his visor as the elite troops clustered closer together. Their biosigns showed elevated heart rates, stress levels climbing. They had been trained to fight humans, but not like this. Not against an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't predict. Focus, their commander shouted. It's playing mind games. We are warriors of the laughing child's voice changed to a woman's scream, then to the roar of some earth predator none of them had ever heard. The sounds mixed together, creating a nightmare chorus that shattered their tactical formation. 2 more soldiers vanished in the darkness. Their bodies wouldn't be found until days later, posed in ways that would haunt survivors' dreams. James triggered his next trap. The floor beneath one squad suddenly collapsed, dropping them into the maintenance tunnels below. They fell awkwardly, their low-gravity instincts failing them. As they struggled to stand in the pitch blackness, something moved among them. Something that moved like a Deathworld predator. "Fall back," the commander ordered, his voice cracking. "All units fall back too." The command center's channel erupted in static, then played a new sound. James's voice reciting an old Earth nursery rhyme in a sing-song tone. "Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies." More soldiers disappeared into the darkness. The remaining troops fired blindly, their energy weapons illuminating the district in strobing flashes. They hit nothing but walls and each other. Ashes, ashes. James moved through their ranks like a ghost, his earth-honed muscles letting him strike and vanish before they could react. Their advanced armor, designed to stop energy weapons and plasma bolts, proved useless against the crude but effective weapons of a Deathworlder fighting in his element. "We all fall down." The last words echoed through the district as James triggered his final trap. The colony's ventilation system roared to life, flooding the area with thick smoke from burning plastics. The elite troops' filters, clogged with frozen coolant, began to fail. In the chaos that followed, James's voice returned to the command channel. "You came here thinking you were hunters. But you forgot something important about humans. We didn't become Earth's apex predators with fancy weapons or advanced armor. We did it by learning from every predator we encountered. The stealth of the big cats. The pack tactics of wolves. The patience of snakes." He moved through the smoke, ending lives with brutal efficiency. The elite troops' formation had completely broken down. They were running now, trying to escape the darkness and the horror within it. "And most importantly," James continued, his voice following their retreat, "we learned that true terror isn't about strength or weapons. It's about making your prey realize that everything they thought they knew about survival was wrong." Hours later, when the smoke cleared and emergency power finally returned, the collective commanders found the shopping district empty. Their elite troops had vanished, all except one. They found him hanging from the central square statue, a crude message carved into his armor: "Send more elites. Earth has many lessons to teach." In his hidden command post, surrounded by salvaged alien technology and monitoring equipment, James Stone began planning his next lesson. The collective's response to this defeat would be brutal, desperate, perfect. Desperate enemies made mistakes. And James had so many more lessons to teach them about why humans were the galaxy's ultimate Deathworlders. The collective warship never saw James's stolen shuttle coming. Their sensors, designed to detect engine signatures and energy weapons, completely missed the small craft as it drifted toward them, running dark and cold through the void of space. Inside the shuttle's cramped cockpit, James watched his target through makeshift sensor equipment cobbled together from destroyed alien tech. His breath frosted in the cold air. He'd shut down life support to minimize detection. The only warmth came from his combat armor's environmental systems. The collective had finally lost patience. After losing hundreds of troops to a single human, their commanders had called in the fleet. 7 massive warships now hung in orbit around New Haven, their weapons pointed at the colony below. Their ultimatum had been simple: surrender the Deathworlder or they would burn the colony to ash. James had responded by stealing one of their shuttles and loading it with gifts from his week of hunting. Now he watched through the viewport as his target grew larger. The fleet's ammunition carrier, its hull bristling with point defense weapons and sensor arrays. His combat computer picked up their communications. All ships maintain bombardment positions. Surface teams report no contact with the Deathworlder in 6 hours. Prepare to commence orbital strike on my mark. James allowed himself a cold smile. 6 hours? Exactly how long it had taken him to get this shuttle spaceworthy and plan his attack. The collective still hadn't learned that when a human predator went quiet, it meant the hunt was about to begin. The ammunition carrier loomed closer. At this range, their sensors should have detected him. But James had learned much about collective technology during his week of warfare. Their ships were advanced, powerful, and completely dependent on active sensors. They never expected an attack from something running totally dark. They never expected human ingenuity. Final warning to colony leadership, the collective commander broadcast. Surrender the Deathworlder in 10 minutes or, James fired his maneuvering thrusters. The small bursts of gas were barely visible against the star field, but they sent his shuttle into a controlled spin. The carrier's massive hull filled his view, then vanished, then returned with each rotation. Timing would be everything. He reached out and touched the shuttle's controls, his fingers remembering 10 years of civilian piloting. Strange how the skills he'd learned in peace would now serve him in war. The carrier passed through his view again. Almost there. 5 minutes to orbital strike, the collective commander announced. All ships begin power-up sequences. James's hand tightened on the controls. The carrier appeared again in his viewport. Now that he fired the shuttle's main engines at full power. The sudden thrust slammed him back in his seat with crushing force that would have paralyzed a low-gravity species. The shuttle shot forward like a bullet, crossing the void between ships in seconds. "Contact," someone shouted on the collective channel. Unknown vessel on collision. The shuttle smashed through the carrier's minimal shielding and crashed into its hull. But James wasn't trying to destroy it, not yet. The impact had a different purpose. When the shuttle hit, it burst apart like a seed pod, scattering its cargo across the carrier's hull. Its cargo of magnetic mines, the same ones James had been collecting from dead collective soldiers all week. Hull breach in sections 7 through 12. Multiple contact points. Security teams. James was already moving. The crash had been calculated precisely, throwing him clear of the wreckage. His armor's thrusters, modified with parts from collective jump packs, guided him toward a maintenance airlock. The mines began detonating in sequence. Each explosion was small, but together they created a chain reaction across the carrier's hull. Warning sirens screamed through the ship's external speakers, audible even in the vacuum of space. James reached the airlock and pulled out his data pad. The collective used standardized computer systems across their fleet, a fact he had learned while hacking their ground forces equipment. The airlock's controls surrendered to his commands in seconds. Inside the ship, chaos reigned. Emergency bulkheads were slamming shut, trying to contain the hull breaches. Crew members rushed through corridors, many not even bothering with pressure suits. They never saw the shadow that moved among them. James headed straight for the ship's main ammunition storage. On the way he dealt with resistance efficiently, a broken neck here, a crushed helmet there. His earthborn strength combined with the crew's panic and low-gravity weakness, made it almost too easy. "Security alert," the ship's speakers blared. "Unknown intruder." The warning cut off as James reached the environmental controls and vented several compartments to space. The screams over the comm channels were quickly silenced that he reached the ammunition storage and began working quickly. The collective's weapons were powerful but unstable. All it would take was the right spark. "All ships target that carrier," the fleet commander ordered. "The Deathworlder is aboard. Destroy." James triggered his final surprise. The carrier's own weapons, rigged to overload, began to detonate. But the explosions weren't random. Each blast pushed the massive ship in a specific direction. Toward the rest of the fleet. As the carrier's hull began to break apart, James made his way to his prepared escape route. Behind him, the chain reaction spread through the ship's ammunition stores. Ahead, a maintenance pod waited, its systems already programmed for a ballistic trajectory back to New Haven. The carrier exploded with the force of a small sun. The blast caught two nearby warships, their shields failing against their own weaponry. A third ship, trying to evade, collided with a fourth. The remaining ships scattered in panic, their formation broken. James's pod shot through the chaos like a bullet, riding the shock wave back toward the colony. Behind him, the night sky lit up with secondary explosions as the carrier's debris field claimed more victims. His radio crackled with a new transmission, not from the collective ships, but from the colony's bunkers below. "Captain Stone?" Officer Turner's voice was filled with awe. Did you just take out their fleet with a maintenance pod?" James watched through the pod's small viewport as burning pieces of collective ships rained through the atmosphere, creating an artificial meteor shower. "Not all of them," he replied calmly. "But the survivors are about to learn another lesson about humans." "What's that, sir?" "We don't just hunt on the ground." James began plotting his landing trajectory. "And I'm not done teaching yet." The remaining collective ships, their confidence shattered along with half their fleet, began retreating to a higher orbit. They had come expecting an easy victory over a single human. They had found a Deathworlder instead. And the hunt was far from over. The collective general slammed his fist against the tactical display, purple blood seeping from splits in his chitinous armor where human-made bullets had found their mark. Around him, his command center, once the colony's main administrative building, lay in ruins. Half his staff were dead, their bodies scattered among broken equipment and shattered walls. "How?" he screamed at his surviving officers. "How does one human keep doing this?" As if in answer, the building's lights flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in, casting red shadows across alien faces twisted with fear. They all knew what the darkness meant. The Deathworlder was coming. In the ventilation system above them, James checked his remaining ammunition. 3 magazines plus the weapons he'd collected from dead enemies. More than enough. His combat computer showed only 20 soldiers left in the building, down from the 100 that had been guarding their general an hour ago. He keyed his radio. "Time to end this dance, General. Your soldiers are dead. Your fleet is broken. Surrender and I'll let you live." The general's response came quickly. "Never. We are warriors of the collective. We do not surrender to primitive Deathworlders." James sighed. They never learned that he pulled up the colony's old maintenance files on his visor display. The administrative building had been built first, serving as the foundation for New Haven's growth. Its systems were integrated with everything: water, power, communications. Perfect. "Let me teach you something about Earth military tactics," James broadcast to the entire building. "Something you should have studied before you came here." He began typing commands into his datapad. Throughout the building, systems came alive. Maintenance robots, reprogrammed over the past hour, emerged from their charging stations. Their simple service tools now carried very different payloads. On Earth, we learned warfare from our planet itself. From the predators that hunted us, and from the prey we hunted. Every environment taught us new ways to kill. The maintenance robots rolled through the corridors, ignored by collective soldiers trained to watch for organic threats. Each one stopped at a precise location, following James's calculations. The desert taught us patience. The jungle taught us stealth. The Arctic taught us endurance. James's voice echoed through the building's speakers. But the most important lesson came from the oceans. He triggered the first robot. It exploded, releasing a cloud of metallic dust into the air. The collective soldiers' energy weapons fired, the blasts igniting the particles. Secondary explosions rippled through the corridor. The ocean taught us that nowhere is safe. That death can come from any direction. More robots detonated. More corridors filled with fire and shrapnel. The collective soldiers fell back, trying to protect their general. They clustered together in the central command room, energy weapons pointed at every entrance. James smiled in the darkness. Perfect formation, for a low-gravity species. But the most important lesson. He triggered the building's fire suppression systems. Not water this time, but something far more dangerous. The ocean taught us that the strongest predator isn't the one with the sharpest teeth. The room's atmosphere began to change. The collective soldiers' armor could handle vacuum, could filter toxins, could resist extreme temperatures. But it had one critical weakness: it was designed for their home gravity. It's the one that can change the environment itself. The artificial gravity plating in the floor reversed polarity. Suddenly, down became up. The soldiers, their armor weighing 3 times what it would on their homeworld, were yanked toward the ceiling with crushing force that in the chaos that followed, James dropped from his hiding place. His own armor, designed for Earth's gravity, easily compensated for the change. He moved through the room like a predator through water, ending lives with brutal efficiency. The general managed to activate his personal shield generator, creating a bubble of normal gravity around himself. He raised his ceremonial weapon, an energy blade that could cut through battleship armor. James almost laughed. Here, finally, was what he'd been waiting for. "You want to fight like warriors?" He drew the metal combat knife he'd carried since his Special Forces days. "Let's fight like warriors." The general charged, his blade humming with power. But his movements were clumsy, his stance wrong. He trained all his life to fight in low gravity. Every instinct, every reflex worked against him now. James moved like flowing water, like desert wind, like Arctic ice. Every motion was calculated, precise, born from evolution on a world that demanded perfection or death. His knife found gaps in the general's armor that no low-gravity species would think to protect. The fight lasted exactly 12 seconds. When it was over, James stood in the ruined command center, surrounded by dead aliens who had never understood what they were truly fighting. He keyed his radio one final time. "This is James Stone to all remaining collective forces. Your general is dead. Your armies are broken. I'm giving you one last chance to surrender." The response came in the form of energy blasts from the surrounding buildings. The collective soldiers had chosen their path. James checked his weapons and smiled. They still hadn't learned the most important lesson about humans: we never start fights, but we always finish them. Dawn broke over New Haven's ruined skyline, painting the destruction in shades of blood and gold. James stood at the edge of the colony's central plaza, his armor scarred and stained with alien blood of various colors. Before him, arrayed in perfect military formation, stood the last of the collective's forces, 300 elite troops backed by heavy weapons and combat mechs. Behind them loomed their final command ship, which had landed in the plaza after James's orbital assault. Its massive hull blocked out half the sky, energy weapons charged and ready. They had committed everything to this final battle. Human. The voice boomed from the ship's external speakers. I am High Commander Vex of the Collective Armed Forces. You have slaughtered our troops, destroyed our ships, and humiliated our empire. This ends now. James checked his weapons one last time. 2 magazines for his rifle. 1 for his sidearm. The knife at his belt. A handful of grenades made from repurposed alien tech. Not much against an army that IT would be enough. You're right about one thing, he broadcast back. This ends today. The High Commander's laughter echoed across the plaza. Look around you, Deathworlder. No tunnels to hide in. No systems to hack. No shadows to lurk in. Just open ground and superior numbers. Even a human can't survive this. James smiled behind his visor. You still don't understand what you're fighting, do you? Want me to tell you your biggest mistake? Enlighten me before you die. You studied human weapons, human tactics, human biology. James took a step forward. But you never studied human history. He raised his rifle not to fire but to point at the gathered army. In all our wars across thousands of years, humans have faced these odds before. Outnumbered, outgunned, backed into a corner. And do you know what we learned? The High Commander's voice held a note of uncertainty now. What? We learned that the most dangerous human isn't the one with the biggest army. James's voice turned cold. It's the one who has nothing left to lose. He triggered the charges he'd planted throughout the plaza during the night. Not explosives, those would have been detected. Instead, he'd used the colony's terraforming equipment, buried deep underground. Equipment designed to reshape a planet. The plaza's surface buckled and cracked. Carefully calculated vibrations, amplified by New Haven's geological structure, sent shockwaves through the ground. The collective troops stumbled, their low-gravity adaptations working against them once again. Formation. The High Commander screamed. Maintain formation. But James was already moving. He sprinted forward, his earthborn muscles launching him into impossible leaps between the shifting pieces of ground. His rifle barked in precise bursts, each shot finding weak points in alien armor that no low-gravity species would think to protect. The combat mechs opened fire, their energy weapons turning the plaza into a storm of light and heat. But James had studied their targeting systems over the past week. He knew their limits, their blind spots, their reload patterns that he didn't try to fight the mechs. He moved through them. Years of Special Forces training combined with a lifetime of Earth gravity reflexes. Where the aliens saw random chaos in the buckling ground, James saw a dance floor. Every step had been calculated, every angle considered. Kill him. The High Commander's voice cracked with desperation. How can one human move like that? James's answer came in the form of precise violence. He rolled under a mech's legs, planted a repurposed grenade in its joints. The explosion sent it toppling into its companions. Chain reactions rippled through their formation as machines designed for stable ground tried to compensate for the shifting Earth. The elite troops attempted to adjust, to create a killing zone with overlapping fields of fire. But James had studied Earth's ancient warriors, had learned their lessons about fighting superior numbers. Let me tell you about a human named Leonidas. He broadcast as he moved through their ranks like a ghost. About how 300 warriors held off an empire. His rifle clicked empty. He dropped it and drew his sidearm in one smooth motion, never stopping his advance. More aliens fell. Or about Simo Haiha, who taught an army to fear the snow. The sidearm ran dry. He drew his knife, the simple metal blade reflecting the rising sun. The aliens actually backed away from him now, their weapons shaking. What about Joan of Arc? Alexander? Genghis Khan? The High Commander's voice held pure fear now. What are you? I'm human. James reached the command ship's boarding ramp. Bodies lay scattered behind him, broken machines sparked in the dust. Not a single shot had touched him. And you should have learned our history before you came here. The ship's energy weapons powered up, preparing to fire point blank. James smiled again. One last lesson, he said quietly. About a human named Odysseus and how he taught us that the biggest threats. He triggered his final surprise. The ship's own maintenance systems, reprogrammed during the night, activated all at once. Emergency protocols engaged. Hatches slammed shut. Power systems overloaded. Always come from inside. The High Commander's scream was cut off as the ship's systems turned against its crew. James walked up the boarding ramp as chaos erupted within. Time to finish this history lesson. The command bridge of the collective warship lay silent except for the sound of labored breathing. High Commander Vex slumped in his command chair, purple blood seeping from wounds that no medical technology could heal. Around him, his bridge crew lay broken, victims of their own arrogance in challenging a Deathworlder. James stood at the main console, his knife dripping alien blood onto the polished floor. His armor was scarred, his weapons spent, but his stance remained that of an apex predator, relaxed yet ready. Why? Vex coughed, his translator struggling with failing power. Why fight so hard for these colonists? They're not even your people anymore. You left Earth. James worked at the console as he spoke, his fingers dancing across alien controls he'd learned to master over the past week. You still don't understand humans at all, do you? We don't need to be from the same tribe, the same nation, or even the same planet. When we choose to protect something, it becomes ours. He activated the ship's communication systems, broadcasting on all collective frequencies. The signal would reach their homeworlds, their colonies, their furthest outposts. Let me show you what you should have learned about humans before you came here. The ship's external cameras activated, transmitting images across the galaxy. They showed New Haven streets littered with broken alien war machines. Collective soldiers lying where they fell, defeated by a force they had dismissed as primitive. The burning wrecks of their mighty fleet scattered across the planet's orbit. This is James Stone, he broadcast, his voice carried to every corner of collective space. Former Earth Special Forces, now a simple cargo pilot. You came to my home. You threatened my people. You thought numbers and technology would guarantee your victory. He turned to face Vex, letting the cameras capture his next words. You forgot what humans really are. We're not just Deathworlders. We're not just stronger, faster, or more durable. We are the children of Earth, a planet that taught us one simple truth: adapt or die. James walked to the command chair, his boots leaving bloody footprints on the deck. Your empire spans 1,000 worlds. You have technologies we can barely understand. But you evolved in safe environments, on worlds that nurtured you. Earth tried to kill us every step of the way. And that made us strong. Vex tried to speak, but only managed a wet cough. James continued, his voice carrying to every collective citizen watching. This is your final lesson about humans. We don't want your worlds. We don't want your empire. We just want to live in peace. But if you threaten us, if you threaten those we protect. He activated the ship's self-destruct sequence with one hand while drawing his knife with the other. We will end you. The High Commander's eyes widened as he finally understood. Too late. This is James Stone signing off. Remember what happened here. Remember that one human with primitive weapons destroyed your army, your fleet, and your pride. Remember that we showed mercy first, but never again. He ended the transmission just as Vex found his voice. Wait. We can. The knife ended any possibility of negotiation. 10 minutes later, James walked down the ship's ramp for the last time. Behind him, power systems began to overload. The ship's reactor would destroy itself and any evidence of collective technology, leaving nothing for scavengers to find. As he reached the plaza, his radio crackled. Captain Stone? It was Officer Turner. Our sensors show the invaders are they all? It's over, James replied simply. Tell the colonists they can come out now. New Haven is safe. He walked through the ruins of the battle, past broken machines and fallen soldiers. The morning sun cast his shadow long across ground stained with alien blood of every color. The colony's bunker doors opened slowly. Faces appeared, human and alien colonists looking cautiously at their destroyed home. Among them, James saw Mrs. Baker herding her students, checking each one with careful attention. Officer Turner and his surviving security team helped the elderly and injured. They were alive. They were safe. That's what mattered. Captain? A small voice made him turn. One of Mrs. Baker's students, a young human girl, stood looking up at him. Are the bad aliens gone? James knelt down to her level, his armor creaking with battle damage. Yes, they're gone. And they won't come back. Promise? He smiled behind his visor. Promise? Want to know why? She nodded. Because they learned what everyone in the galaxy needs to know. Humans protect their own. No matter the odds, no matter the enemy. When we have something to protect, we don't know how to lose. The girl seemed to consider this, then asked, Can we rebuild our school? I miss my friends. Of course we can. James stood, looking at the gathering colonists. We can rebuild everything. Better than before. That's another thing humans are good at. As if to punctuate his words, the collective command ship exploded behind him, its reactor finally overloading. The blast lit up the morning sky, a final reminder to anyone watching that humanity was not to be underestimated. In the following weeks, news spread across the galaxy. The collective empire fractured, its leadership humiliated by the defeat at New Haven. Other powers revised their assessments of human capabilities. Trade agreements were hastily updated to include stronger protections for human settlements. And in every military academy, in every tactical database, in every strategic analysis, one simple warning was added. When facing humans, remember New Haven. Numbers mean nothing. Technology means nothing. If you value your survival, do not threaten what they protect. The galaxy has many dangerous species, but only humans have earned the title of true Deathworlders. Because only humans will ensure that if you threaten their home, there will be no survivors.